Namaste, welcome. Amazing you could take the time out before Christmas to be here, be with us. So I thought of some slightly different thing we can do today. And I want to talk about the foundation of this particular teaching. And it's kind of odd when you study with these highest of spiritual teachers, and teachers is not even the right word to say, which you'll see in a minute. You're in the company of someone who's way beyond teaching. They're not teaching anything. They're just hanging out. And Maharaji was a really bad case of that. But there's another one I want to talk about, and that is the teacher, the Sufi teacher of Irina Tweedy. Irina Tweedy was an English woman, I think, who studied with this very high Sufi teacher who lived in a town very close to where Maharaji's ashrams are. And she wrote a book about her experience called The Chasm of Fire, which became very famous. It's like really one of the important books in our spiritual tradition. And she met this man. I don't quite recall the story. It's been many years that I read the book, but she met this man and just fell absolutely in love with him. Sounds familiar? That's what happened to us around Maharaji. And she was with him for some time and learned some things, etc. And then she was told, but it was like there was no teaching. She just learned by being in the presence of this being, right? There was never, as far as I remember, there was never once a mention of Sufism, which is the tradition he was in, right? And then suddenly she's told to go back to England and teach Sufism. And she's going like, what? What's Sufism? And so she finds herself back in England and is trying to teach something she has no idea about. But somehow this transmission she received from her teacher had taken root, and by hook or crook, it started to develop into some teaching that people wanted. And then after a while, she went back to India, and he was at that time very sick and went through the dying process. And there's these long chapters in the book I remember. Maybe they're not even long, but they appear that way in my mind, in my memory, where she is at his house and he is inside with his family, very sick, very like leaving the body, kind of sick. And she's just in this love on the outside of the threshold of this home, waiting day after day after day, and then eventually he dies. But in this suffering created by her love, which is a very special kind of suffering, she was transformed, and she then went back to England and wrote this book and became a very notable, worldwide known teacher. But she was never taught about Sufism, because these highest mystical spiritual traditions aren't something we can learn in a book. They're not a rational thing. Of course, books can be written about these traditions, but these books don't really give you the essence. And when somebody has the essence, they then have the capacity to develop that essence into a stream of teaching. So Maharaji, in a sense, was worse because he wouldn't even tell us to teach or do anything. And in Krishnadas's case, he just decided, he said to Maharaji in his mind, okay, I'll just sing to you. If you send me back to America, I'll just sing to you in America. And the rest is history. Now he sings in the whole world. And he didn't tell me what to do either. But I had this experience after he died where I got sick with this deadly cancer, and then suddenly heard this voice that said, he loved you so much, this will not be wasted. And instantly the fear was gone. I knew this voice could not be doubted. And the fear was gone, and the next thought that came up was this great desire to somehow learn to pass on the gift of this love to other people. And God knows I wasn't ready for it. And then, of course, the cancer disappeared. You know that story. And so I was given some essence, and I keep looking to refine my ability to transmit that, to put it into words, to create a pathway that leads to that exquisite experience of the heart. And you know, we all do the best we can, so I put it together, and we have HeartSourcing Yoga as it is. And now I had a wonderful experience. I came across this book. It's called The Secret of the Yoga Sutra. The Yoga Sutra, this particular book, Yoga Sutra by Patanjali, is the authoritative text on Raja Yoga, which is the yoga that includes Hatha Yoga. You know, it has several different branches, 8 different steps, and one of them is Hatha Yoga, which is now known as yoga in the West. It's just a small part of that yoga. So it's a very technical yoga that is the best thing for you when your personality likes to do things to the use of will. Because the 4 great yogas are structured in such a way that they correspond to different capacities we all have. We have will, and we can use our will in order to travel this road to enlightenment, and that is Raja Yoga, or this Patanjali Yoga. We have an ability to feel. And out of that comes Bhakti Yoga, the devotional path. This is also something that's very strong in Christianity and also in Islam, the devotion to God. Then we have an ability to act. And out of that comes a path of service, of selfless service. And finally, we have the ability to know. Out of that comes the path of wisdom, Jnana Yoga. So these are the 4 great yogas. And Maharaj's teaching for us primarily was Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion, because that's just what we automatically fell into when we were around him. And through this Bhakti, through this opening in the heart, through devotion, through surrender, in whatever way you know to give up a little bit of yourself so something of the higher reality can come in, was the core of this teaching, and that's how I was basically taught. But then it turns out that heart-sourcing yoga really has to include all these different facets, because we all need some of that. We all need to act in this world, and so we need to know how to act in a way of selflessly giving, because that is the way to fulfill ourselves. We need to know how to use our will, because it's just helpful to sit still in meditation. And we need to know wisdom, because it's our deepest nature. So all these paths come together. But now I found in this interpretation of the Yoga Sutra by Pandit Rajmani Tigunit, who is the head of the Himalayan Institute, a wonderful commentary on these very concentrated sutras, which speaks completely to heart-sourcing. And he says in the introduction that he was taught these techniques and skills up to Sutra 136. And then his teacher stopped and let him sort of catch up and fill out. And why 36? Because he says this, in his tradition, is the essence of the entire teaching of yoga. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking something from the Raja Yoga tradition and translating it into heart sourcing to reinforce our understanding and complete our understanding of what we may do more from a devotional point of view. So here is still a lot of technical descriptions of pranayama and different yogic techniques that you can do, and they're certainly wonderful for people on this path. And if you want to incorporate some of that into your path, feel free. But the essence in my understanding of heart sourcing is really the transmission through the grace of the Guru. And what is the Guru? There's absolutely no need for you to have a relationship with Maharaji, as I do, because Maharaji is a form, Maharaji, that historical person, is a form that expressed the inner Guru, the Satguru, which is the same in all of us. The Satguru is that capacity of our innermost being to enlighten us. So it's that inner presence of ultimate wisdom and love. So here in the yoga tradition, he calls this particular part the core of the entire text. And I want to read a few things out of his description, because they can enrich our understanding of what we're doing here in a more intuitive way.
Ramgiri, can you just check your plug-in?
This is on.
Is it light?
Yeah.
Has a red light?
It's light. It's lit.
Because I'm not hearing anything now. Can you just check again?
Excuse us, we have some technical issues. What am I to do to check this? It's I'm on channel on frequency B.
Okay, that's the one that is out. Just continue. I will change this.
So he combines Patanjali's original text. I know this is different from how we usually talk, but I think it gives us some background, and that background out of this tradition that is thousands of years old and was created by unbelievable sages over this long period of time in a land where there was a community of sages that has existed truly for thousands of years. Sages who've had this enlightened consciousness and communicated with each other in various ways to create a body of knowledge and a body of teaching that can pull us up into this realm of understanding who and what we truly are, and in that process liberate us. So I treasure this tradition, and I'm very careful not to distort it in some way, even while giving credit and adhering to my guru's teaching, which is not as technical as this. It's more direct. It's more of an act of grace. However, in this text, he combines the original writing of Patanjali with his main commentator. There's hundreds of commentaries who have been written about this book over the centuries. But the one of the main commentators is Vyasa. Vyasa was a sage of enormous standing, who you can find in many areas in the Hindu tradition. And combining these two, the wisdom of these two sages, he translates their commentary on this particular part of the text by concentrating on what he calls now the lotus of the heart. We would say the cave of the heart, same thing. He's not speaking about the chakra. The chakra is in your astral body. The cave of the heart, or what he calls the lotus of the heart, is much deeper than that. It's the place of oneness, the residence of God and of the soul inside of us. By concentrating on the lotus of the heart, there arises a state of sorrowless joy, which is infused with inner light. Upon its emergence, such a state anchors the mind to a peaceful flow, free from all thoughts. So we have two qualities in the heart which we have already spoken about many times. This is just a different way of putting it. Sorrowless joy, a joy that is beyond any pain and suffering. We have that place inside of us that is available for all of us. We can tune into that. We can allow it to lift us up. And a self-luminous power, a luminosity, a light that is in us. Remember when we meditate on this image of the light or the sun, that's that aspect. And it communicates itself effortlessly. So let's see what else he has to say in his own commentary. So first he comments on the aspect of the sorrowless joy, which of course that joy and the luminosity are the same thing. They're just two aspects of the same experience here deep in the heart. This sorrowless joy is called Vishoka in Sanskrit, is a state in which there is no trace of sorrow or anguish. In this state, we are free from doubt, fear, anger, grief, guilt, regret, and shame. So what you can do now as you're listening to these words is to take in the understanding of that and ask yourself if you want that. And through that, reach a deeper commitment to your own freedom. That's really the benefit. It's not so much the technical description and so on, but it's that ability to say, I just let go of all the things I'm clinging to, all the false identity issues and the worries and the fears and the stuff that keeps us thinking we are we. That really doesn't serve us, but just creates a lot of trouble. I'm ready to let go of that. When I hear these words, I want that state that's described here. And he describes it very beautifully. In this state, we are absolutely certain of who we are and of our relationship with both the higher reality within us and the external world. Absolutely certain of who we are. Free from doubt, fear, anger, grief, guilt, regret, and shame. We can distinguish pure consciousness from the consciousness fully entangled with our deeply rooted, subtle karmic impressions, all our stuff. We know the truth about ourselves. We are the creator of our personal world. We also know that we have the ability to transform and redesign that world. And then a little further down, he says, we see that our life stretches to a realm where fear, old age, death, hunger, and thirst do not exist. I mean, imagine this for a moment. Just stop here for a moment. What is he describing here? Could this be a realm, a way of life in this physical world that we know? No. There's always in this realm fear, old age, death, hunger, and thirst. But he writes very clearly, we see that our life stretches here in the heart. We see that our life stretches to a realm where fear, old age, death, hunger, and thirst do not exist. A realm where we are not dependent on anything for our sustenance. So he isn't all that clear about it, but he gives us plenty of pointers toward that space which I call the realm of the sages. The space we enter in the heart when the heart opens like a gate and we can enter that heart. So we experience this hridayam, this innermost heart, in two ways. In the way its essence flows out from within us into our experience in the world and enriches and clears us of suffering, heals us, and touches the people around us. But now he's talking to us about that space that we enter when we enter into this inner world of our being. We know then that we exist beyond the confines of our body, senses, and mind. In other words, our external experience as we know it. Perennial joy itself is our locus. It goes wherever we go. I mean, we can read this and say, yeah, okay, so that I understand that, and let's go on, right? Then we're just staying very shallow in our mind, and you can say, yeah, I understand the words. But what does it really mean? What kind of existence is he describing here? A state of absolute perennial joy means unchanging joy that goes with us wherever we are. We're absolutely free. Riding that wave of joy, the mind moves freely within the space of consciousness. Our emotional injuries have been healed so completely that no trace of sorrow remains. So let's just hold off on that sentence. Our emotional injuries are so much what keeps us in that straitjacket of who we think we are. That's our history, and the painful part of it at that. But we could even say that even the positive memories qualify for emotional injuries because they also give us a sense of false identity. Oh, I'm the big guy, or something like that. Our inherent joy has manifested fully. Riding that wave of joy, the mind moves freely within the space of consciousness. Our emotional injuries have been healed so completely that no trace of sorrow remains. This inner healing nullifies our understanding of the world as full of sorrow, and therefore also nullifies our desire to attain freedom from the world. We can go from here to Byron Katie's example, who is very clear in her description that in her world, no suffering exists. She just today sent out a Christmas message, which is this short piece of a video, like 50-second video, where she talks about what we want now, Christmas, right? What we want is what we have. Because what could be better? But for that, we have to drop all the ideas of what we need and what we don't have and what's not right, and all our quetching and complaining. And our desiring to have what we don't have. It's that desire that keeps us miserable and in scarcity, paradoxically. I need some milk. I don't have enough. I don't have enough. You know, we live like that. We have. an absolute abundance if we just stop and look. So this is the state of mind he's pointing to. It nullifies our desire to attain freedom from the world. This is the old story of spiritual seekers. Oh, we want freedom from this world because we identify the world with suffering. But when we're clear, we see that there is no suffering. On the day Maharaji left his body, he said to the man who was with him, they drove down from the mountains into the plains, and there was a beautiful rainbow that spanned itself through a big valley. And they looked at the rainbow, and Maharaji said, this is the world of God. Only God can make something that beautiful. And he wasn't just talking about the rainbow, he was talking about the world. But it takes clear eyes, it takes the eyes of the heart to see that. There's no need to disconnect ourselves from life, for we are at peace. Inner healing and joyfulness are the defining characteristics of Vishoka, that inner joy, the state of sorrowless joy. The second state, identified in the sutra, again, they're two sides of the same coin, is Jyotishmati, which is a condition of inner luminosity. And that's something that doesn't have to be developed, it's already fully in us, but we need to develop our ability to perceive it. And so in heart sourcing, we start with simple visualization, like imagine a light in your heart expanded into the sun. But it's very important for us to know that this is not something we visualize or imagine. We start with imagination because we're blind. So when you're blind and you're led into a room, somebody tells you there's a door, go straight to the other end and there's a door, you can go into the next room, right? This is the way we're visualizing that. It's like, okay, so there's this, and then we can go through that door. And as we do this often enough, our ability to see the already existing luminosity develops. Right? So this is very different from imagining something that's not real. This is a real state of our heart of hearts that we're simply opening our eyes to, and we're using visualization for that. In this state, our sense of I amness is fully illuminated by the light of pure consciousness. We, the little self, and I'm going to just change something in the text here to make it more clear, begin to see the true self, whereupon our notion of ourselves as an isolated individual consciousness dissolves. In other words, we see our connection to God, to the totality of it all. This realization leads to trustful surrender to our eternal companion, which is God. And we can find that eternal companion right here in the heart. So let me jump from there. He speaks about what is the lotus of the heart. The lotus, he calls it lotus, we call it cave. It's the same thing. I use the word cave. I prefer that because it doesn't confuse us with chakras. Chakras are often, it really means a wheel, but they're often seen as lotuses. The lotus of the heart refers to the state of consciousness in which the individual soul and God are united in a common being. In the beginning of this book, the author writes something very interesting. When he was a young kid, I believe, he came to his first teacher, who told him that attachment to an external God is a great hindrance. It's a great obstacle. That was true for him at that stage. For most people, that's what they know. This devotion to an idea of a God external to them that has created this world. And that's perfectly fine to develop the heart, to develop a sense of devotion to something bigger than yourself. But in the process of that, you eventually have to realize that the place where you can access that God, who is both outside of you and inside of you, if it's the creator of the world, of course he created you too, so he's got to be in there too. That the place where you can most clearly access that reality that we call God is right here in the heart. So we're dealing here with a storyline and experience that is beyond the attachment to an external deity.
You before you continue, before you read that part, the part before said two words that are trustful surrender.
Yeah.
What is that? What is trustful surrender?
Well, it's a great question. What is trustful surrender? When we see ourselves in this package of individual personhood, being this person we think we are always plagued by some suffering. Because we see ourselves as separate from the totality of life, the flow of life, the presence of God. We see ourselves as lacking this and not having that and wanting this and so on. We're beset by desire, fear, and the resulting confusion. When we have trustful surrender begins when we have an idea of a higher reality, which can be seen as first as something external to us. And yeah, we go through stages, so at first we do see it as something external. In my case, of course, the guru, my idea of God, was external. But what happens in the case of gurus is very interesting. They keep you around as long as you need to be around them to mature. And then they either send you away or they leave. And they leave to free you of this sense of, oh, I don't have it, he has it, and I have to rely on him. And suddenly you're like, oh my God, I'm here, I'm totally alone, my guru has died, my guru has left, my guru has sent me away. And that's when the next stage of growth happens, when you have to realize that that essence that you admired in the guru, that you admire in your understanding of God, is nowhere else to be truly found but right here. That reality is what any real guru points to. And that's what we need to surrender our small sense of self to, is that enormous reality that is the true self inside of us. And that surrender takes many different phases, has many different aspects. It goes on for a long time. It's not something that we do once and then it's done. It just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think we'll touch on some of that as we go further here. I just want to point on some highlights. Here, for instance, right there, he says, lit by the light of pure consciousness in the heart, the mind loses its long-cherished illusion of I amness. I am this, I am that. Its lust for preserving a sense of personal identity vanishes. Its fear of merging into higher reality is destroyed. This is a really big thing. I wanted enlightenment more than anything, I thought. But I also somehow had the sense that enlightenment somehow is this exquisite state that's transcendent, and it's like bigger than I was, and it scared me. It scared me because it seemed to be not human in a certain way. And so I wanted it, but I was scared of it, and that's not a good place to be. But when you knock on a door long enough and hard enough, eventually it opens. So in my case, this came when I was with Byron Katie and her now husband, then fiancé, Stephen Mitchell. And I had instinctively and deeply known Katie's enlightenment when I first met her. By the way, she's going to be here in Miami on the 31st of January. So I knew that I was dealing with an enlightened being. There's a whole story of how we met and how I knew this. And then I saw the two of them in love, like this most human, wonderful, gentle, beautiful in-loveness, right? And it, because of the power of her being, it like showed up in remarkable ways. I remember during breaks in my first one of her schools that I took, that we were in California in this little hotel, group of maybe 200 of us, and we would go out into the courtyard during breaks, and I would go out, and then there was this light that hit me sort of out of the corner of my eyes, and I would look over there, and sure enough, this happened many times, there was Katie and Stephen going like this with each other, you know, like this, falling into each other's eyes. And because her presence was so powerful, I just saw this light that was emitted by both of them. It was just beautiful. And the simplicity and the utter human quality of that love freed me of that fear. The fear of merging, letting go of my little identity, that's the surrender, and merging into this higher reality. And I say, this higher reality, but where is it really? It's here.
And can I understand that higher reality as just this very moment? So if I am able to see that this very moment is the only thing I need to surrender, I don't need to believe that I need to trust an external being in order for me to surrender.
Yes.
Because then I'm going to just think that something that I need to surrender to something else
has to happen. Yes.
Outside
exactly.
of me, instead of seeing that the perfection of what is now is what is, and that goes to every moment.
Beautifully said. You're absolutely right. The surrender is
because
always to this moment.
And I'm just mostly thinking that there is always a sensation of I need to support myself into something. When in reality, that something I'm supporting myself on is just me at the end of the day. Exactly. So the images, the gods and goddesses are just basically a training wheels in the way I see it.
You got it.
For me to know that all that is just my own mirror that I can
and it's beautiful.
Surrender to.
There's no reason to reject any part of it. But the only surrender is to your divinity and your humanity here and now. It's all already there. Fully, completely, without anything lacking. But the mind says, yes, but. Right? Okay, so we go on.
There is another question from the chat regarding that. Give me 1 second, I just want to catch that thought. So Matthew asked, why?
Hi, Matthew.
Why do so many think strongly that the guru has to be external?
Well, that is also correct at a certain stage of life. When you are given the relationship with a guru who is in a physical body, then for you that guru is an external entity. You see it there first. That can even happen, I know your question probably angles to that. When you meet a guru who is no longer in the body, but you have a vision or some impression of his presence in a body, that's perfectly fine. So it's not an either or thing. This divine friend is outside of us in that form that we know, love, and cherish. He or she is also inside of us as our very own self. And so we have access to both the best of duality and non-duality at the same time. We don't have to throw out duality because we cling to non-duality. That's just another trap. I know that there is no world outside of me that I'm not creating. Or let me say that positive, that I'm creating the world outside of me. That I, my true self, is creating even the figure of Maharaji, my guru. That is the ultimate truth. But I can also, when I'm not in that place, and I'm not in that place all the time, I also cherish knowing him as a being, as human as myself, only a few steps ahead of me. There's an important passage in the Ramayana where Ram, God, asks Hanuman, the perfect devotee, how do you look at me? How do you experience me? And Hanuman says, when I think that I'm my body, then I am your servant. They actually translate it as I'm your slave. Now, slave for us has negative connotations. In India, they don't see it that way because they say, well, if I'm the slave of God, the maintenance of my needs is his responsibility. I'm free. All I have to do is my work, God's work in this world. And it's his job to take care of me. It's a very powerful little difference here, but let's call it servant. When I think I'm my body, then I serve you. When I'm aware of my being as the soul, then I know I'm a spark of your divine light. I'm part of you. But when I have the vision of truth, then I know you and I are one and the same. It's important for us to know these three different levels because we move through these different levels. Sometimes we have the vision of truth and there's only oneness. Sometimes we experience ourselves as a spark of light, and sometimes we think the body, we are. And so we serve that divine presence that we understand in some way, either externally or internally. Doesn't matter. Well, so let's go over this again just for a moment. Lit by the light of pure consciousness, the mind loses its long-cherished illusion of I amness. that I am this little ego in a bag of skin. Its lust for preserving a sense of personal identity vanishes. Its fear of merging into higher reality is destroyed. The mind is grateful that this inner light has swept away any sense of spiritual darkness. And then I think I want to jump to some comments he made. He speaks about that in different people, that state of sorrowless joy may be first. In more the devotional types, the state of sorrowless joy dawns first. In the people that are more truth and mind-based, the inner luminosity comes first. But really, they're just two parts of the same coin, and we don't need to make much distinction here. Regardless of which experience dawns first, the end result is the same: absolute clarity. We know our mind well. I would say we know our heart well. We are aware of its binding and releasing properties of the mind. We are no longer burdened by subtle impressions of the past, for we have the power and wisdom to preside over them. Anybody have subtle impressions of the past?
Mm.
That's, oh, let me tell you the story of my life. Right, so we are no longer burdened by these subtle impressions of the past, for we have the power and wisdom to preside over them. What does that mean? We are fully present in the here and now. We are not pulled out by these old karmic forces out of the here and now into worrying about the future, fretting about the past, etc. We are aware of our karmic impressions, but they no longer influence us. In other words, we all have this human personality. I have a human personality that has certain likes and dislikes and, all of that. And that is okay to have. That's simply the karma that I have in this life, this particular being that houses the spirit that I am. Now, when they run the show, these likes and dislikes, then I'm in trouble. But when I preside over them, when I see that what they are, I'm okay with the way I am, the person I am. I like certain things, I don't like certain things, I stay away from this, I have a tendency toward that. I can embrace my personality and it's no longer an obstacle. So the karmic impressions no longer influence us. Doubt and fear vanish. We have confidence in the healing and guiding embrace of inner divinity. Remember how we're doing healing with heart sourcing? Did you allow that inner light, that inner essence to flow into the place of your body that needs help? Powerful stuff. The question is, how deeply do we do it? How deeply do we open up to that? How deeply, especially, are we able to expose ourselves, those parts of us that need help, to that inner light, so they can heal in it? We trust and respect our own discerning power. Our desire to prove ourselves vanishes. We are free. Do you get a little idea that you would like to be like that? Mm. Good. That's the purpose of this session. It's not all this description or stuff. You don't have to remember any of that. but just hear it and say, I want this. This sounds so good. It sounds so good that I make a decision right now to stop wasting even a second of my time. And I will use the time I have in this life to move toward that. This is the most crucial stage in our spiritual development. Once we reach this level of realization, there's no possibility of ever falling back. Even if we attain this experience only while drawing our last breaths, it remains with us forever. You know, I say a lot how whenever you make an effort at heart sourcing, sometimes maybe you don't feel the heart at all because you're just too distracted. It doesn't matter, it's cumulative. Every effort counts. Every effort's like knocking on the door, and you know what Jesus said, if you knock, it shall be opened. When? He didn't say. Okay? Damn. But it shall be opened, right? Now it may be opened at the moment of your last breath. But if so, if it takes that long, it remains with us forever. Now here he describes this, beautiful. Death has no power to nullify it. The experience of Vishoka and Jyotishmati, that inner light and the sorrowless joy, infuses our mind with unwavering retentive power. I would call that soul memory. Unwavering retentive is memory power, right? So that experience is there, it cannot leave us. What does that mean? When we're not done fully with our journey to enlightenment, we return to this world with our wisdom and power intact. And we may return by choice, not by the karmic forces that pull us. We return to this world with our wisdom and power intact. We remember that our inner guide, protector, and provider is within us. Because this indelible memory protects us from doubt and fear, our life is joyful and luminous from the outset. As soon, what he's talking about here is what's also known as an incarnation of a very high being or a high yogi. As soon as our body and mind are fully mature, first we're going through the childhood stages, then we resume our spiritual quest exactly where we left it. In other words, after attaining Vishoka and Jyotishmati by heart sourcing, we are able to live in the world and yet remain above it. We are free. One who has attained this level of experience will be born as an extraordinary yogi. There's a technical term for that, I'll spare you. To underscore the radical nature of the freedom brought by Vishoka and Jyotishmati, both Vyasa, that commentator, does not, well, we don't need this part. Yogis of this caliber are established in their own unique world, the world made of freedom. They may live in the world, but they are not part of it. They are born free, live free, and die free. This is completely open to all of us. There's nothing that stops us from attaining this except the stuff that we're already dealing with on a daily basis, our karmic impressions. And if we get more committed to dealing with them in the most effective ways, they disperse and we become increasingly free. That in itself is a wonderful way of life. then the purpose of their birth and death is simply to complete their remaining journey while established in their sorrowless, luminous consciousness. At every stage in their life, both here and hereafter, they are joyful and lucid. And then jumping a little further, just a little bit more, eventually both the space occupied by our body and the space immediately surrounding it is infused with luminosity. Experientially, it is as if this luminous field of consciousness has replaced our body. It becomes the locus of our self-awareness. We exist in it. I'm going to stop here. So what he's painting is the picture of a very different way of existing, a way of existing in this great joy and guided by this light that is the innermost nature of who we are. And it's funny that we get to this just before Christmas. Because what is the symbolism of Christmas? Is it so important that somebody 2,000 years had some experiences? Yeah, it's wonderful. But what's more touches us is what this story really means, how Christ is born in us, how this light that came into the world, we think 2,000 years ago, well, if I live in darkness and something happened 2,000 years ago, what good is it for me? But when that light is born and found here inside of me, then it truly makes sense and meaning. So this is the true sense of Christmas, and that's why we celebrate and we give gifts, because it's such incredible good news that we have in us this light of the heart. So I hope that hearing these words from a different teacher just sort of brightens up your desire to find your freedom, to find the light that guides you, and to find the joy that is really your birthright. And to know that the journey ahead of you into this is absolutely safe. Remaining who we have been doesn't sound so safe to me. It didn't feel very safe when I was a kid. But opening to the heart, opening to this great gift of who we truly are, and realizing that all the love in the world that we will ever experience will come from here. It may be triggered by somebody looking at us and saying, I love you. And then it finally reminds us to come to that place and find our own love. But if we're dependent on that, it will happen very rarely and only by good luck. Even in a great relationship, most of the time you're not with your beloved. You're not in that state, right? So get hungry. Want it all the time. Make the mind come down to the heart. Notice when the mind gets caught in the grip of the brain with its stream of thoughts, its worries, its regrets. And notice that this is just not important. It's not important because it's not even real. How many worries have you made up in your life that never came true? How much have you fretted about something in the past or carried it as a burden that was over? What is true is the light of your being here and now. And that light shines most brilliantly in the heart. And the heart is always available. So we can identify when we are getting caught up in something else. We can become sensitive to stress because that something else is always stressful. Even if it's, oh, I'm going to do this great thing. You go out, 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 out. You go away from that inner richness, that potency that can guide every action in your world. If you have this space, if you are fully in the here and now, then act from that and everything will be fulfilling because you don't worry about the outcome. You simply do your best. And in that way, you serve God in you. So I'll leave it at that for today. I wish you a really Merry Christmas. One in which that light becomes more than a theory or something somebody says, but a truly felt experience in you that grows in depth and grows in volume and grows in this joy that is beyond any opposite of joy. That's what sorrowless joy means. A joy that has no opposite, a love that has no opposite, a light that has no darkness. That is what Christmas symbolizes. And Christmas is every moment. Like right now, only every moment nobody gives me gifts. So there's something wrong with that. No, joking aside. That moment is the gift when you recognize it. And we have that all the time. Namaste.
Namaste.